You are watching the press preview, a first look at what's on the front pages as they arrive. In the next half hour, we'll see what's making the headlines with the journalist and author, Rachel Shabi, and the Telegraph's chief political correspondent, Camilla Turner. So let's see what's on the front pages of some of those newspapers for you now. And the Metro has word of a threat from the former head of the army, Lord Dannatt, that the intelligence community may seek to replace politicians accused of compromising national security, as Liz Truss and Suella Braverman have been in recent days. On the same subject, The Guardian warns of a so-called Wild West attitude to national security in government. The Eye hears Rishi Sunak may reverse his decision not to attend the COP27 climate summit in Egypt after criticism from fellow Conservative MPs. The Mail reports on a petrol bomb attack on a facility housing migrants in Dover, amid questions over whether some centres are safe and sanitary. That story is also the lead item in tomorrow's Times. And on the subject of migrants, the Telegraph reports that the government is planning to house migrants in hotels alongside the public to try to regain control of the Channel crossings crisis. According to the Financial Times, Vladimir Putin's decision to pull out of the deal that allowed Ukraine to export millions of tons of grain is likely to have a catastrophic effect on the poorer nations which rely on the supply. The Mirror focuses on the growing pressure on the NHS and says it's facing its worst winter on record because of flu, COVID and staff shortages. And a reminder that by scanning the QR code you'll see on screen during the programme, you can check out the front pages of tomorrow's newspapers while you watch us. And we are joined tonight by Rachel Shabi and Camilla Turner. Welcome to you both. Let's start with The Guardian and their headline there, Ministers accused of Wild West attitude to UK's national security. And this is following on from several breaches that we've heard about in recent days. Rachel.
Yeah, that's right. So The Guardian has spoken to various security sources and also former officials about the breaches, as you say, really troubling security breaches that we've seen over the last few days, reported about Liz Truss in her days as Foreign Secretary and also Suella Braverman more recently. Now, the Wild West quote is coming from David Penman, who's the head of the FDA, which is the union that looks after senior civil servants. And he's talking about a culture, essentially, within government that is sloppy over security, which obviously is incredibly troubling. And he's sort of looking at potential reasons why that would be the case. We've seen throughout the day, people have been saying, well, is it incompetence? Is it more of the sort of one rule for them, one rule for the rest of us vibe that we saw with Partygate? David Penman is saying there just isn't culturally, there isn't a government interest to sort it out, and that this is how they want to operate. They don't want a degree of scrutiny. But the piece is also quoting Bob Kerslake, who's a former senior civil servant. And he points out, which sounds right to me, that this kind of breach, the fact that Braverman lost her job over it and was then rehired several days later in the same position as Home Secretary, he was saying, if a civil servant did that would be the end of the road for them, for their career. And it's really not in any way acceptable that wouldn't be the case for a government minister.
Yes, and Camilla, we've got crossbench peer and former head of the British Army, Richard Dannatt. We know now, quoted quite a bit in this, accused Truss and Braverman of ill discipline and poor judgment. Do you agree?
Yes, that's right. We've got some quite strong words here coming from a number of different members of, or former members of the military establishment, security services, as well as sort of experts in intelligence matters, all really speaking out about their concern over a string of incidents we've had recently. First of all, there was the Suella Braverman sending a message from her personal email, and that leading to her being sacked under Liz Truss before being swiftly reinstated under Chancellor Rishi Sunak, but we've also had reports that emerged today of Liz Truss having her phone hacked as Foreign Secretary earlier this summer. Of course, incredibly worrying. The fact that some of the messages that were hacked included sort of secret messages about Ukraine, messages between her and Kwasi Kwarteng, and for these sorts of messages to be falling into the hands of potentially foreign rogue states is, of course, a massive cause for concern. These two incidents in a short space of time. So I think that's why we're having just so many voices speak out against it and really speak for the need of some kind of shake-up or review to be done to really show ministers that they can't continue acting in these kind of ways.
Yes, and we move on to the Metro, where Lord Dannatt is pictured there, and the quote is that he's warning that voters will punish such slackness. Our leaders must be sufficiently disciplined to only communicate through authorised means, which themselves are encrypted and are secure. Frankly, it's not good enough. If these people aspire to be in senior positions of leadership, they've got to be disciplined, they've got to follow the rules, or frankly, will put other people in their place. I mean, you can't get harsher words than that, Rachel.
Yeah, I'm not sure who the we is that will put other people in their place. Perhaps he's referring to voters, but yeah. I thought
he was referring to the public, I think.
Oh, that's all right then. That's all right then. Yes. Well, that's where the power to do that lies, of course. I think that he's probably right that voters would punish this sort of thing. I mean, it is so sloppy, isn't it? And it is really troubling when you look at the allegations that were made about the leaks of the fact that Liz Truss's mobile phone was compromised, and the kind of information that that would have been gained access to because of that. People are saying most likely Russia, but it could be another country. It's really like quite troubling information, highly confidential information that could be used against the UK. So of course the public are going to see that and think, are they compromising our security in some way? And why is it also that ministers just aren't following the most basic protocol? Because it isn't the case that they're unaware of this. Most of the reporting is saying that the protocols are in place. Everybody is well aware of the security that they need to follow, what they need to do. So it does really beg that question, well, why aren't they? Why aren't they doing what they're supposed to be doing around this very sensitive issue?
That is the question. Let's move on to the Mail and this story about the migrant centre that came under attack in Dover. Camilla.
Yes, so this was quite a shocking story based on events of today, where 3 firebombs were thrown into this Dover facility that houses migrants, and the attacker reportedly then went to a petrol station and took his own life. So a really shocking report coming out there, and also just the latest in a sort of series of worrying reports coming out of these migrant centres. We had the news recently that in a nearby facility in Kent, there was an outbreak of scabies and diphtheria because of the overcrowding there. So really some quite significant issues going on in these asylum centres, and something that both the Home Office and sort of Border Force Police really need to get a grip on. We've also had Tory MPs in the local areas speaking about the sort of the rising tensions and the need to really sort out what's going on with those facilities, because clearly having issues like overcrowding and actually violent attacks on these centres is something that the authorities really need to get a grip on. Staying with
migrants, but a different story in the Telegraph we'll move on to now, Rachel, and this is the idea that Suella Braverman is considering bringing forth a policy where migrants will share hotels with members of the public, so they wouldn't be hotels just dedicated to housing migrants.
Well, obviously there's a real problem there with how asylum seekers who are awaiting processing where they're being made to wait. And Suella Braverman was told that she's illegally detaining, essentially, asylum seekers in these appalling conditions, these processing centres, where, as we've heard, there's outbreaks of infectious diseases and people are just living in horrendous conditions. We're talking about families, we're talking about children who have already, been traumatized and fleeing, unimaginable circumstances. And so there is that question of why aren't they being processed quicker? Why aren't their claims being dealt with faster, so that actually they don't need to wait for months on end in hotels, which isn't an ideal solution either. Lots of organizations that work with refugees have very often criticized this policy of having asylum seekers and refugees have to wait for months on end in these very crowded conditions in hotels when they just want to start their lives. They're also they're not allowed to work or seek employment while the claims are being processed. So again, making them very vulnerable.
Rachel, we must leave it there and take the break now. Rachel and Camilla, thank you very much for the moment, but stay right where you are. Coming up, could Rishi Sunak U-turn and go to the COP27 climate summit after all? We'll be discussing that next. You are watching the press preview. Still with me, Rachel Shabi and Camilla Turner. There they are, right on cue. Let us have a look at the Eye. And it looks, according to the Eye, that the Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, may be about to do a massive U-turn on whether he attends COP27 or not. He could actually go along. What do we think to that, Camilla?
Yes, so this story is about how the Prime Minister is now saying, or his people are saying, that he's prepared to go to the COP27 summit after all, having previously said that he wasn't going to go on the basis that his absolute priority is the economy and he needs to be in the UK so he can sort out the preparations for the fiscal statement, which of course is happening on November 17th, having been pushed back from the Halloween budget that was meant to be tomorrow. So, some people might say that's fair enough, that the dealing with the economy and the upcoming budget is undoubtedly the most pressing need for the British economy domestically. However, there have been a lot of criticism, people who think it sends the wrong signal if the UK isn't sending their head of state, their most senior politician. Of course, you could send someone more junior, but if they're not sending the Prime Minister along to this summit, then it signals that it's not important for the UK. We've had multiple voices coming out and criticising Rishi Sunak, not least his own climate czar, Alok Sharma, saying that it doesn't send the right message. Also, George Osborne, the former Chancellor, and multiple others. So we're now getting a sort of a softening of stance from Downing Street, saying that if good progress is made on the budget, then there is a possibility Rishi Sunak could go along to this after all.
Yeah, but this seeming change of direction is coming after the paper reports a major, they're calling it a major Tory backlash, and senior government sources are saying that he may go to Egypt if, as you say, good progress is made on the fiscal statement. But, Rachel, this is just going to seem really weak, isn't it?
I think that's right, yes. I think what it suggests to me is bad political instincts, because how could he not have known that, first of all, this would be quite a big issue amongst his own party, but also that it's quite a big deal with the public as well. I mean, we've just had a UN Environment Commission report say that there is now no path to getting on track with climate emissions reductions or to reduce global heating, because the progress on that front has been so weak and so bad, and that all we can do now is try and mitigate the worst impacts of the climate crisis. Clearly, this meeting next week in Sharm el-Sheikh is incredibly important. I think everyone understands the urgency of that. And yeah, I think it does look weird that Rishi Sunak didn't really get that.
We shall see, because he hasn't U-turned yet. So we shall see on that one. Just very quickly, you've got just under a minute, Camilla, to tell us about Liz Truss's diva demands, as reported in the Metro.
Yes, so this is an extract from the upcoming book about Liz Truss by the Sun's political editor, Harry Cole. It talks about the demands she had as Foreign Secretary, which included having multiple double espressos per day, asking for freshly prepared food everywhere she went, saying absolutely no sandwiches and no mayonnaise, also wanting a Sauvignon Blanc bottle of wine every night. So really just laying out in quite a lot of excruciating detail.
I think the 42,000 coffees a day is an overestimate, though. Camilla and Rachel, thank you both for taking us through the papers.